Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this panel. It's called Careers in Student Affairs. We have some great panelists that are going to be sharing their experiences with you. I want to introduce you to the panelists, and they'll take a minute to talk a little bit more about themselves. We'll open it up to some questions, and then we'll close it out. So if I haven't explained who I am, my name is Jihan, and I'm the counselor coordinator at the Marina Education Center. I work closely with a team of other folks who put on other panels and events like this. So we're hoping to have future panelists and that features other industries. So definitely look forward to more opportunities and events at MPC and in the future. All right, let's get started. I want to first introduce Erin Noel McFerrin. Erin Noel McFerrin is currently in her 6th year as the Assistant Director of Residential Learning with University Housing at Georgia Southern University. In this role, she oversees the departmental curriculum model, residential learning, community programs, academic initiatives, aspects of staffing and training, and other duties as assigned. She's also worked at other institutions like University of Iowa, and also was a community director right here at CSU Monterey Bay, along with working at a service learning program at Appalachian State University. So we're really glad to have her here. Our other panelist is Esteban Alfaro. He's a first-generation college student who arrived from the US from Costa Rica when he was 13 years old, came through the community college system before transferring to a Cal State school, working in business, but then realized he wanted to work in higher education, where he got his master's in counseling. So in his current role, he's the director of the first year experience and Title V programs at Long Beach City College. And he's also a part-time adjunct first year experience counselor at MPC. And our third and final panelist is Chris Kalima. He is also a first generation college student who's been an educator since 2000. He has experience working in the K-12 setting and at the CSU and community college systems. He's worked in recruitment, he's worked in Upward Bound, and he's in his more recent role, his current role, he's also a counselor at MPC. I'm going to turn it over to the 3 panelists so that they can add a little bit more to their bio, starting with Erin.
Hello. So like she said, my name is Erin McFerrin. I am currently in Georgia, though if you see me, the background and hear the rain, I'm in Kentucky at the moment for fun. Kentucky for fun. I know it's an oxymoron, but it's okay. So I work in Georgia at Georgia Southern, and I mostly work on our residential curriculum model. So a lot of our programming components are student learning components. There's what I like to call the living side of the house, which is being on duty, doing conduct, making sure the buildings don't burn down. And I do everything besides that, essentially. I still serve my time on duty in a leadership rotation, making sure the buildings don't burn down, or if they do, we are present at the scene. But for the most part, most of my work is more on the learning aspects. So a lot of what I do is also working with different campus partners all over the place, as well as some of our community partners to find opportunities for our students to get some more experiential learning outside the classroom kind of stuff. I do some teaching for first year experience and various other duties as assigned for all student affairs. Prior to this, I was at the University of Iowa working with learning communities there. They had a program, well, they had a higher up basically say, we want all students in living learning communities, and you need to do this in a year. So they went from 13 to 32 communities in 1 year. And I was one of the people that was brought in to help with that transition. We all knew it was a bad idea at the time. They have since gone away from that, and we have proven that that was a bad idea, but we've learned a lot from that. And then previously I was at CSU Monterey Bay as one of the community directors. Prior to that, I worked at Appalachian State University. I worked in service learning. So I worked with a lot of our faculty to develop service learning classes, do community-based research, that kind of thing. And actually prior to that, I had no interest in student affairs. I didn't know it existed. But my background was doing nonprofit administration, volunteer management, human services kind of work. But I graduated when the stock market crashed. And when the stock market crashes, a lot of the nonprofits go away too. So I had to retool, and student affairs was kind of like that retooling direction for me, and how I got kind of back into service just from a different angle than what I expected.
Thank you, Erin. Esteban, would you like to go next?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Jihan. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Esteban Alfaro. My pronouns are he, him, his. I went to my undergraduate degree at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, so very close to Monterey. I majored in business administration there, in finance specifically. After graduation, I really wanted to get into finance, and so I started taking more graduate level courses at UC Berkeley in the Bay Area. Worked in the corporate world for some time, and I'll share that in a little bit in this panel. But throughout those years, I really decided that I wanted to go back into education. So I received my master's in counseling from University of Southern California in Los Angeles. And now I am the director for Title V and the first year experience programs at Long Beach City College. And so in this capacity, Title V, which is our HSI grant, for those that don't know, is the US Department of Education. They have granted colleges some money to enhance and develop the programming for the Hispanic serving students population at the colleges. And so that's one side of the portfolio. On the other side, I manage the first year experience program. So that includes high school outreach and matriculation, dual enrollment at the high schools, college promise, anything that has to do with that transitional programming support from the high school to the college. So the Summer Bridge, Welcome Days, we have a Male Success Academy. We also have a Career Academy and Destino, which is like a STEM related program. And lastly, I'm also a FYA counselor at MPC as an adjunct here. So I work with incoming high school students that are graduating and ensuring that they have an educational plan so they can start in the fall semester here with us, as well as doing counseling for the Summer Bridge, which is Jumpstart in the summer. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you, Jihan, for the opportunity, and I'll leave it at that.
And we'll turn it over to Chris.
All right. Hello, everybody. Like Jihan said, I'm Chris Kalima, and excited to be here with the other panelists as well, and everybody else in here too. And just in regards to the different roles that I've held so far, right after college, I started as a recruitment officer for San Diego State University. So it was really easy for me to do that because I went to school there and got my degree and had such a great time that it made it easy for me to say what a wonderful campus it was and a wonderful place for students to experience and continue their education. And then from there, I did that for 3 years and realized I wanted something more. So I went to grad school at San Diego State as well and did a multicultural counseling program, which was a non-traditional 1-year class that was really more like group counseling for a year, which basically their approach was, in order for you to be a good counselor, you need to know what your own triggers and biases are. And so pretty much with 24 other students would be talking about our experiences as students and professionals to help us be better counselors. And then decided I want to do school counseling because I want to be able to work with students from the K through 12 level, because that's where I really enjoyed the space. And so from there, did internships at the elementary and middle school level, but really liked working with high school students. And so after graduating from San Diego State with my master's degree, was fortunate to find a job up here in Monterey and was a counselor at Carmel High School for a year and really enjoyed that experience. But then another opportunity opened up at MPC where I was able to be a counselor for the TRIO Upward Bound program. And so if you're not familiar with the TRIO Upward Bound programs, they're federal grant funded programs that help students who are first in the family go to college and are low income earn a college degree or enter into college. And so I worked in Upward Bound for 8 years as a counselor, where it's a really wonderful opportunity where I got to work with students right after they graduated from middle school, right before they started high school, and work with them for 4 years to ensure that they entered high school and prepared themselves for that. And then after that, I worked with Upward Bound for 8 years and had an opportunity to be a math science Upward Bound coordinator counselor. So focusing on the same kind of population or working with the same population, but more focused on the math and science fields. And that was a little bit different because of the fact that we were a regional program. So what that means is that we serve students along the Western region, including the Pacific Islands like Hawaii, Marshall Islands, Chuuk, and Palau. And they would actually spend 4 weeks, so actually 5 weeks at UC Santa Cruz, away from home for the first time for many students, first generation, low income, trying to live away from home for the first time for 5 weeks. And that was basically getting up at 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning and ending our days at 12 o'clock and 1 o'clock at night. Similar like what I know Erin knows, she experiences in the housing and the residential life, where it's just all day, all long, always something going on. And then after doing that for 6 years, had the fortunate opportunity to be a counselor, like Jihan mentioned, for MPC. But with this role, I still work with dual enrollment students, so still get to work with high school students. And I get to teach as well, which is also something I really enjoy, being in the classroom where so many wonderful experiences and challenging experiences happen as well, with watching students grow, but also doing the individual counseling and making sure students have their ed plans and helping them achieve their educational goals, whether it's a degree or certificate or transferring or all the above. And so really blessed and honored to be a part of this panel and looking forward to answering some of these questions.
Thank you, everybody. So my first question touches a little bit upon like your educational pathway. Is a master's degree required to do what you do? And if you have your master's, did you go in right away, or did you take some time off before you decided to go in? So tell me a little bit about your experience with that and your thoughts. And this is to anybody.
I can talk a little bit about that from a non-counseling standpoint, because that's going to be a different answer, I think. I think for student affairs specifically, if you're not going into a counseling role, or if you're not, trying to be a director, executive director, provost, dean, going up the pipeline, I don't know that a master's is necessarily absolutely needed. I think it's preferred. So I think that the industry in general, the field in general, is looking for people with master's degrees in the area of student affairs from entry level up. But I also think that COVID has shed a lot of light on whether or not that's the most effective practice or most equitable practice. So I've seen a lot of different places say that, if you don't have a master's degree, we'll hire you maybe at a slightly lower pay scale. I think also regionally, it makes a difference too. So like when I lived out west, I think there was a lot more entry level resident director kind of positions that you didn't have to have a master's. Maybe they preferred it, but you didn't have to have it, or they expected you to be in a master's program while you were in that position. But from what I've seen out on the East Coast and at some of the Big Ten schools and stuff like that, it's a prerequisite for the job. But I think I've seen a lot of people that have life experience and have work experience that could still take the place of a lot of the stuff that you see within the master's program, depending on like what kind of thing you're doing, what kind of school you're at, what their expectations are, that kind of thing. I did not go straight through from an undergrad to a master's program. I worked for a couple years. I lived out of my car for a while, like trying to find jobs and driving around and stuff. And I would recommend that to others in the future. Maybe not living out of the car, that part's not as fun, but I think that I saw a huge difference in my grad program between the folks that had gone straight through and the few of us that had jobs in between, as far as like, what we were accepting of sometimes when it comes to the work world. Like there's a certain things in the work world you're like, yeah, that's how that goes. There's some, cruddy components that you don't really want to do that way, but that's the way different, pipelines come down and that kind of thing. But I saw a lot of my other colleagues struggle with that if they had never had a job outside of higher ed, if they'd never had anything that wasn't a student affairs leadership position. So I think that the people that had some of those experiences and had that other experience outside of the bubble of higher ed, I think they came back to it with a little bit more appreciation for the development that people were getting, for the constructive feedback that people were giving them, for the opportunities that they were being given, that kind of thing. So I think sometimes it does help to have that break if anything, just to figure out like a little bit more specifically, what is it that you want to do instead of just rushing through to say, I got to do the next thing. And I think sometimes that's what students do is they say, I gotta have that other thing lined up. But sometimes it's okay to not know. Like I did photography for 2 years. I'm not a photographer. It was fun though, and I learned a lot. It was still a good time.
I could take a stab at this one. As many of a lot of our students here are first generation college students. So I was myself. I attended a community college in the Bay Area, and I remember going through my community college experience, wanting to go into education, but then my parents are like, "Nope, you have to do business." And so I wish that I had a career counselor like Jihan and the Career Academy to really show me what I really wanted to do, because I ended up choosing what a lot of us do, what our family wants us to do, and so I decided to do a business major in finance because that was cool back then. And so I followed sort of my dad's, he was pushing me to do that. And so I transferred to Cal Poly where I majored in business. And so after that, I really wanted to go into education, and he's like, nope, you got to use your major. You have to go somewhere. So I started applying to a bunch of corporate America jobs, and I was lucky that I got an interview for Wells Fargo in a high rise in Miami. At this point, I was applying in San Francisco, New York, Miami, and they called me from Miami. So ended up flying out there. And so I got the job, and it was like this rotational internship program where I learned about marketing, finance, human resources. And so I loved that a lot. And so after Miami, I came back to California, and I did that for almost 10 years. And throughout those years, I really, really wanted to do something really meaningful with my life. And so I started doing a lot of assessments and a lot of self-exploration. And a lot of the times I was helping my friends and my colleagues get into schools. I was working on their educational plan, and they're like, why don't you just do that for a living? You know, it's like, yeah, you're right. And so I started doing that. And so I say all that because I took like a 7 to 10 years break from my undergraduate to my master's program. And so I did apply to my master's in counseling. I ended up getting in. And so I finished that. After graduating, I went back to the community college, because that's, to answer your question, Jihan, I feel like it really depends where you want to go. So you have to decide student affairs, do you want to go into a community college, a 4-year, or a CSU or a UC system? So it all depends where you want to go. In my particular case, I really wanted to work with the student population at a community college. And so I started working at a community college, started working at financial aid. Then I went to EOPNS. I worked as the foster youth officer for the financial aid office. So I got to experience that student population. And then from there, so to answer your question about the master's, it really depends what you want to do. So if you want to start like in a classified position, typically the master's is not required. When it comes down to manager, director, I would say it really depends on the college and the district. For my district in particular, a master's is required for a director level position. And if you continue up the administration route, so that would be associate dean or dean level, master's is definitely required for the dean level. And then if you want to continue to go up as a vice president, the doctorate is not required, but it's highly preferred. Like almost every vice president has a doctorate. So it really depends on what route that you want to take. And so, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
And maybe if I could just add in a sense of, for those who might not know what I think student affairs in regard to what Esteban had mentioned, like the classified level, right? Where somebody may come in and work as a financial aid counselor as an advisor, right? And so, or in an admissions office as an evaluator, where they're evaluating transcripts and those kind of things. And so, like they said, there's and Aaron had mentioned this as well, there's so many different levels where people can come in without the master's degree. And like you said, I think it's just definitely beneficial for individuals to go through that process of figuring that out, because like they said, it really depends on, for many of us, what we go into is what we've been exposed to, right? In the sense of careers, right? And so much of it has been maybe watching a lot of CSI and saying, I want to go into this because that's what I'm exposed to, or like Esteban said with his parents and saying, go into business. And my parents are both nurses and they want me to be a nurse. And I'm like, I don't like health field, I don't like blood. And so that is not me, right? And so, because that's what we've been told. And so definitely trying to use that time to explore, because I also took some time off, but I think that the two panelists had definitely summed it up in regard to taking those life experiences to really figure things out. But I just want to mention that classified, making a reference to the classified statement that Esteban had mentioned.
Thank you for your feedback on that. Let's go see here. My next question is a little bit about how you got into this field and in regards to like mentorship. Were there any people in your life that helped you navigate this career field or was pivotal in helping you decide that this is the path you wanted to go?
I'd like to answer this one. One of the things I think that was important for me was that my parents and my family were about 3 or 4 hours away. And it was important for me to be far enough away from them, but not too far, right? To be able to have some time if they're coming down to clean up the place and be ready to go, but close enough to be able to, if I want to go get laundry done and go home and get some food, I could, right? And so, but it was important for me to have, and I didn't know this at the time, that what I needed was to have a support system in college and while I was in school. And I refer to them as my mothers and fathers on campus. And I remember them, like I still see them in my head and in my time. You know, I had Assistant Dean Robertati, who was this tiny, under 5 foot, big haired, petite lady, but who was so fierce at the table and would advocate for students. And she was someone that whenever I saw her on campus, are you doing good in school? How are you taking care of yourself? Are you eating? You know, giving me a hug. And so it was her, it was Assistant Dean Selma Reed, it was my EOPS advisor in regards to South Florida, and those people really took care of me in the sense of while I was on campus and being a first generation student and having somebody that I knew cared for me were people that I looked up to and kind of led me towards this field and knowing I want to be that for somebody. Because I say that people who go into education either have one of two experiences. Either they have somebody that has really impacted them, or they lack somebody who and had to do things on their own, right? And said, I want to be that for somebody because I didn't have it, or I want to be that because I had that. And those people in my life were those mentors who helped me get to that point. And then once I went into my career at SDSU, my first boss, Reggie Blaylock, he was the one who taught me how to be a professional in a different way, right? And they helped guide me, the previous ones helped guide me to go into student services. And then Reggie taught me how to be a professional in that sense. And I think that's also important when you first get into your job as well, where you have those people. And he's somebody that was actually a sponsor in my wife and I's wedding. So he's like our godparent for our marriage, just because of the fact that he was just somebody who impacted our lives. And I think student services, student affairs individuals play such an important role because we're at such a developmental stage in our lives, right, in college, that they have such a huge impact on us. And I think those individuals were definitely mentors to me and who I reach out to today, where I'm just like, hey, I'm struggling with this. How do you balance life and school? How do you balance being a professional and wanting to do so much stuff in the community or spreading yourself too thin or those kind of things? And I think, you know, those mentors were definitely integral and still are integral in my life as development as a professional. Even though I've been in the profession for 20 years, there's still people who I consider my elders and say, how did you do this? How did you survive this? How did you adjust based on your priorities with kids and those kind of things? So definitely those mentors in my life have and will have an impact on me as I continue to grow. And I love having the opportunity to speak about them because I think definitely allowing students to hear that is definitely something that's important to find in your experience as a college student and a professional in student services is definitely important and crucial to your development.
Anyone else would like to add?
I could add to that one, Gian, because I think this is really meaningful to me too. I would say that I arrived here when I was 13, so my parents didn't really know anything about the system. And I remember just like going right into high school and my parents, I mean, they had no idea about the SATs or anything like that. So, you know, it's really hard. I didn't do the SATs. So when I graduated, I'm like, where am I going? And so while my parents didn't know, something that I really loved about them is that they're warriors for education. So they said, I don't know how you're going to do this, but you're going to enroll at this college. They don't even know that community college was a college. So they're like, you have to enroll there. And so I did. And I think for a lot of us first generation college students, we don't know anything, right? Like programs or services, they call it that navigational capital. So it's just a fancy way for you to know how to navigate the system. Like none of us, a lot of our first gen, we don't know how to do that. And so to Chris's point earlier, you have to build a support system at the campus, you know, working with counselors, deans, directors. And to this point, for me, you know, those are the counselors and the deans that helped me get to where I was today. They literally empowered me. They saw something on me that I didn't see before. And they told me, and I, you know, we're anxious, you know, I'm like, how am I gonna do this? I don't know anything. And they just told me, don't worry how you're gonna get there, just know that you're gonna get there. And those are the words that stuck with me for my entire life. And I feel like that's how I've been, I am where I'm at today, because I listened to those words. So my advice to you first gen students is to start looking for mentors. It's a two-way relationship, right? They're gonna help you and you're gonna help them. You're gonna take them to coffee, they're gonna take you to coffee, lunch dates, whatever it is. You have to make sure you build on that relationship, because it's like a flower, right? If you don't give it water, it's gonna die. So you have to invest your time into your mentors, and they're gonna take you a long way. It's gonna be really helpful for you.
That's a good segue, because I think sometimes when we think about mentorship, people think it's like this formalized process, right? Where they have to apply or do something, and there's like a certain code of conduct that you have to do in order to say someone's your mentor. But for someone who might be, you know, they're just exploring and they want to build this mentorship, but they're scared and they don't know how to start. Like, what tips and advice do you have for students who are like, this is new to them, this mentorship piece?
I'll throw on to that. I've had my own mentors throughout, you know, my career and my upbringing and all that. But I think one of the people that was the most influential for me probably doesn't even remember me, honestly, because she was my academic advisor in a residential college format. So it was like a college within a college. So that support network that I had was built in to that particular program. But the academic advisor in there, I was one of those students that was like, I want to do this, but then I want to do this, but then I want to do this. Like picking a major was this big stressful thing for me because I like so much stuff. So picking one thing, I remember one time she told me, like, you just need to pick a major. It doesn't matter, but you need to start mourning the careers that you're not going to have. And I was like, that is a great way to look at it. Like, I need to have a funeral for me as an artist. It's okay. I don't want to be in art, but I have to mourn that. And I think that her ability to help people see that there's more than one way to get to different things. I mean, like you said, I can't remember who said it, but somebody was saying, like, you think about your career based on what you're exposed to. If you've only been exposed to 4 different careers, you have no idea that each of those 4 careers have 18,000 different subsets of careers within those. And like, you would never know to even look for those things unless somebody brings you to them. And I think she was really good at being able to kind of get a gist of, like, what is it that you're interested in? What are some of those personality traits that you have? What could work for you? But being able to find some of the intersectionalities between those things. So like, I had no idea that human services existed as a career path. But she's the one that helped me find that career path and ultimately figure out kind of where I was going to go with my career. And like I said, I don't think that she remembers me, but that mentorship component, she might not remember that. I remember that. And I think it's important to know that, like, you have an influence on people that sometimes you don't even know that you have. So keeping your idea of what mentorship is open. Like you said, it doesn't have to be a formalized thing. I think sometimes it would be easier. Like, I'm an awkward sauce person. I'm not going to find a mentor easy. I find people that I can connect to. And when I can find somebody that I can connect to and I can laugh with, that is how that mentorship piece comes for me. Because then I feel like I can be myself and I can be authentic around that person. If I can be authentic around you, then you can, impart the wisdom that you can impart. I can ask the questions that I need to ask and not feel bad about asking those awkward sauce questions. But I think it really does come down to relationships and being able to find people that you connect to more than here's this person in a position of power, or here's this person that has a lot of influence over the environment. Like my academic advisor didn't have any influence over anything, I'm sure, at the end of the day, but she was still really good at reading people and being able to point them in the right direction. And that was something I really appreciated.
Can I add one thing as well in regard to, I think Erin mentioned a good point in the sense of similar like with teachers and people in general and bosses. You're going to find good ones and you're going to find ones that don't fit very well. And I think when you mentioned the thing about trying to seek out mentors, is be okay if a mentor doesn't fit when you try it and like, okay, I don't know if this is right. Or even if they fit for the time that who you are in that space works, but then it doesn't 2 years later, that's okay as well. I think because I do have some people, I'm sure we all do, in the sense of who at some point in our life were very instrumental in our lives. And then at some point we either grew out of it or lost connection, and that's okay as well. And so if you're looking for a mentor, be okay with knowing that it's not a lifelong commitment, that you're going to be stuck with that person, right? That maybe you've learned as much as you could from that person, maybe they did as well, and then it's okay to move on from that as well. So don't feel like it's such a big thing. Like Najee had mentioned that as well. Like it can be such a scary word to look for that, but be okay in allowing that relationship to grow or not grow, depending on what your needs are.
I like the idea of having supporters versus mentors. Like I feel like it's a little bit less scary and it's a network of supporters. So if anybody's going into the field and you're a mom, there's a fantastic Facebook page called Student Affairs Moms. And everybody that's on that page, that is the only Facebook student affairs group that I've never seen, knock on wood, some crazy drama happen, because the SAMS group, man, they got your back. Like we all sat there and held dirty, disgusting, stinky diapers. We can be there for each other in other professional ways. And sometimes that's all it takes, is like having that network of people, those supporters who you can just laugh with and you can commiserate with. And, you know, sometimes you're the mentor and sometimes you're the mentee. And I think that can flip flop too. I mean, I have somebody that I consider a mentor that, you know, when we have kids around similar ages, so like if her kid is going through something after my kid has, now I become the mentor. And I think that that's the best mentor relationships, is when you can grow with that and it becomes more than just like a one direction kind of thing. It's a give and take.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. There's a really wonderful book by Sylvia Hewlett, and it's called Forget a Mentor, Find a Sponsor. And if you Google it, I think there's a PDF out there, and it's the idea that a sponsor is like a supporter, like Erin said. It's like a two-way street, and a supporter or like a sponsor will help you. It's kind of like mentor to the next level, help you find your strengths and help you develop the areas that you're underdeveloped, those areas that you feel like they see on you that you don't see yet. And I think just a tangible, you know, how to do this, you know, if you go to a conference or even if you go to an office space and you like somebody that you think you connect with, I would just either look them up on the website. There's usually like a connect with us, or like there's a biography about that person. The other helpful tool is LinkedIn. A lot of the times, you know, the mentors will have a LinkedIn page where you could learn more about them, their careers, what schools that they went to, and you'll find a lot of things that you could connect with that person. And it's just a matter of sending them a quick email, you know, introducing yourself, sending them an email through LinkedIn, or even visiting their office hours or office at the campus. And that's how I've done it in the past. And I've been lucky that, like Chris said, some of them respond, some of them won't respond, and that's okay. So you just got to learn how to take no and then just keep going, you know.
I've seen that book as well. And I think one thing that I've seen from that is if you can find somebody at your institution who's helping you to find a place at the table as part of that sponsorship. So like they're advocating for you in that space to get a new experience, or, you know, this person should sit on this committee, like helping you in that way. It's a very tangible thing. So instead of mentorship where it can be this very large, like, I don't know, I think of a mentor and I think of like Yoda or something, like something larger than life. But a sponsor is somebody that can like help me get to my next stage in very tangible ways. And I think that is really useful to have.
Great feedback. So this is a two-part question for the two different groups that might be watching this. One would be for current community college students. What, other than finding a sponsor, really cultivating those relationships, what kind of resources or activities should they try to engage in to further their understanding of the field of student affairs? And for someone who's already like who's graduated and is working as a professional, and they want to take the next step, what can they do as a current professional to further their understanding of where they want to go in student affairs or higher ed?
I know for those that are in the field already, or at least maybe grads in the field, they're kind of like, already testing the waters and that kind of thing. There's different institutes and conferences that you can get nominated to go to that kind of bring you a little bit farther. So there's something called Stars College. I want to say that's with Akuhuai, I think. I'm not entirely sure if that's true. There's something called the Rely Institute. There's a lot of different things for like entry level or emerging leaders, that kind of thing, that if you can talk with the people who are in that field around you and just ask them like, hey, what opportunities would you suggest? A lot of times that just comes with, getting some kind of letter of nomination or something like that. And those particular institutes tend to be really geared towards helping you find that path that you're looking for, helping you develop yourself. They don't always have to be very specific to, this area of student affairs or student services. They can be very broad, but just helping you to find what you need out of that experience. There's also a ton of organizations out there. And within all those organizations, there's usually different knowledge communities, or there's different affinity groups, that kind of thing that you can join. So even just, joining some of those things on a virtual level can at least get you exposure to some of those things that either are resources that you could tap into that could be really good for you, readings, articles, or if you want to get that sponsorship, that mentorship connection, you might see somebody within those groups that are doing different posts or something like that, that's something that speaks to you, that you can kind of reach out to them and say, hey, can you tell me more about this?
Oh, thank you, Chris. I will add to say that I would say that it really depends on what you want to do. I think that the first step would be to decide, okay, do I want to work at a community college for 4 years? So for example, let's say students right now at MPC, I would say that one of my recommendations is to try to get a job on campus, right? Because actually that's how I developed my interest. I started working as a peer advisor at the EOPNS office. And so that's immediately when I'm like, I love this. And so try to do some type of college internship. And if you have already graduated and you have your bachelor's, I know that you can get jobs at a 4-year, for example, if you want to go into the counseling world and you don't want to commit to a counseling program, because to backtrack, you do need a counseling degree to become a counselor at a community college. You can become an academic advisor at a 4-year without a master's degree. So a lot of the times, a lot of people would do that. They will become an academic advisor and see if they like that, and they do that at the 4-year, and then they decide, you know what, I do want to get a master's. And so when you're in the middle of your master's program, a lot of the times you will do academic coaching as an internship, or like a student success coach type of internship. And then those are the things that would help you solidify where do you really want to go. So I would just say, try to get as much as experience as possible early on so that you can start deciding which route you want to take.
And for me, I think that the other piece of advice, or additional advice, that the other two panelists gave some great ones as well, is that I love watching movies and I love quotes. And so one of my favorite quotes is from the movie The Matrix, which was a while ago. And there's a point where the main character is talking to his mentor, right? And the mentor, the main character saying, well, I didn't know I was supposed to go down this. This person told me that wasn't supposed to be me, right? He wasn't supposed to be the one. And the mentor goes, well, there's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. You don't need to know the path. You can walk the path without knowing where it's going to end. And the reason why I say that is because as a student, for myself, it wasn't I wasn't involved in anything in high school at all. And I went to college and I was like, okay, it's going to be different. And so I got involved in as many things as I could. And one thing led to another, which eventually led me to my career. And so I think that as a student, if you're not looking at a job, if that's not like, oh, I don't know about that, I don't know if I want to commit to a conference, maybe getting involved in opportunities on campus will lead you to making a decision on what that path will look like, right? Where one opportunity led to another, where being a representative for one led to a president of another. And those kind of things led me to a point to help solidify what I want to do because I had these experiences. I know Aaron and Esteban had mentioned this as well, is having those life experiences outside of the classroom can provide you the insight to say, no, I don't like that. And yes, I do like that. And being able to slowly kind of massage what you want to do, because there is so much pressure for students to have to make this decision now. And when I talk to students about this process is that it is a process where who I was 5 years ago isn't who I was 10 years ago. And being able to adjust to those priorities in your life and who you are will determine what that path will be. And it's okay to not know where you're going to end, right? Where when I was working with high school students, I thought at the time, that's who I was. And then now I still enjoy it, but that's not who I am now. And so as a student services professional, opportunities present themselves in so many different ways, right? Where one role will lead to another and one role will lead to something else. And no, I don't want to do that one, even though the opportunity sounds great, because maybe that's not who I am right now. And it looks like I'm blurred for some reason. So I'm going to step up a little bit, but I think being able to explore and being able to say, each experience may not lead me exactly to where I want to be, but it's going to teach me more about myself, which will help me eventually make that decision. And I think that's one of the other pieces is that in addition to everything that's been mentioned, is being okay and saying that everything may not lead exactly where I think it may be, but I'm still going to walk the path to find out what that is going to be in the end. And knowing that that may change, where it used to be when you get a job back in the day that you would stay in that job until you retired. And that was the only thing that you did. And now it's just not the case where we change professions 3 times within our lifetime, right? And that's okay as well. And so be okay with the process.
Thank you.
I think that's a really important point. The fact that like people change their careers and it's okay. I think sometimes people see that as failure. Like I did this thing and it just didn't work out, but that doesn't mean failure. It just means that it's a stepping stone on a much larger path that you might not see the whole thing.
Yeah, and I was just going to add that I never thought I'd be here at MPC. I think I started my graduate program with the intention of becoming a counselor like 14 years ago, and it took me 14 years to get to this place. But I was a success advisor, a coordinator, a director, now adjunct faculty. Now I'm, here. So yeah, that just shows you that there's never like a linear process to get there. But I'm thankful for all those experiences that I had to get me to this point. So I know this is not my panel, I'm moderating. So thank you for that. Yes, I think that would just reminding students that it's okay to change and you're not stuck, and opportunities lead to other opportunities. That's fine. That's perfectly normal for many of us in this field. Question about your work week. Tell me a little bit about do you have a typical work week? And Chris, I know you are working as a counselor, but I was also maybe wondering if you can talk a little bit about like the recruitment side, because I know that's like an entry point for a lot of students to go into student affairs. So maybe talk a little bit about recruitment, and also your current role. And then Esteban, same. I know you've had like the financial aid piece, like that's also another entry point for a lot of students to get into higher education. And of course, Aaron, the wealth of experience you bring with housing and residential life. What is a typical week?
Sure. And so I think in regards to, asking, I'll just go first because I know you put my name first. So sorry if I kind of jumped that. But in regards to student recruitment, as a new professional, is pretty much 40 hours a week, typical 9 to 5 for the most part. The recruitment aspect, what was nice is being the first job out, there was a lot of traveling, which was nice because I had certain regions in California and Washington and Oregon. So I got to travel and the campus paid for it, which is a great first-time job. I know Esteban mentioned going to Miami, which I'm so jealous about, right? And so that was great, but then there was a lot of traveling. So there was, some late night flights and booking car rentals and driving 3 hours to get to one spot. And then you basically as a recruitment officer, once they're out in an area, you usually try to hit as many spots as possible to be able to talk to as many students and to maximize on the amount of money that it's costing to travel. And so sometimes in one day, I'd hit up 4 or 5 schools, high schools in the area to make presentations, to talk to students. And so a lot of traveling out of normal business hours as well, sometimes Saturdays and Sundays, depending on what the schedule is like. If I had a presentation on Monday and it was in Northern California and I was in San Diego, I'd fly out on Sunday and get prepared, drive out on Monday, and then changing hotels multiple times while I'm out there, 3 times a week sometimes, to just get as many spots in the Northern Bay or Northern area as possible. But it kind of just depends on where the boss and the department wanted me to go based on the data that we looked at. So that was a little bit more, I won't say time consuming, but it was less structured in that sense. And I think that's why I know Jihan and Aaron had mentioned this, especially in the very beginning. It's great if you don't have a lot of responsibilities, if you're right out of college and you don't have a family and that kind of stuff, but it does start to wear, and there's definitely a turnaround where individuals who start off on that in those professions don't usually stay, they find other opportunities as well. And then in my current role as a counselor, I work 30 hours a week with student contact, with 5 additional hours spent outside doing community work and things like that. However, and I'm sure Esteban and Aaron and all student professionals know that just because the work day is over, doesn't mean that the work is over. And kind of like with, as an educator and a teacher and professor, which I know both of them are also as well, that you're grading, you're doing lesson plans, you're reaching out to students. And I think that's the other piece that, although that it is a traditional workspace, especially as an educator and student professional, it's going to be very important for you to determine what that balance is going to look like. Whether it's going to be what the boundaries are going to look like for you as a professional, to be able to say, no, I'm not going to work during this time, or yes, I'm okay with working these late hours, and maybe it's after the kids go to bed and that kind of stuff, and you're grading papers or creating your lesson plan. So it kind of really depends on you as an individual, plus what the work expectations are, because sometimes they'll be flexible, where my 30 hours a week will be having to work late nights until 6 and 7 structured, or sometimes it's allowing me to be able to make that shift and say, I want to stop working at 2. But it really depends on the profession, the department, the organization, the campus community, what those expectations look like. But generally speaking, that's what it looks like for me at this time.
Thank you. I'll respond about the financial aid piece. If you work as a classified, let's say financial aid advisor, financial aid assistants for the financial aid office, it's typically also 40 hours a week. Occasionally, there are like promised family nights where you have to do a presentation in the evenings. Sometimes you have to do those community events like Chris was saying on Saturdays. And so typically if you work 4 hours on a Saturday, you could take them off during the week. So a typical week would look like, sometimes you'll be doing drop-ins, sometimes you'll be doing meetings with your students. And the beautiful thing about being in the financial aid side of the house is that you actually could explain to the students how they're going to pay for college. So you kind of go over the FAFSA, the California Dream Act, you break it down for the Pell Grant, the Cal Grant, and then at the end of the day, you process their financial aid package, and then they get their monies dispersed into their award letter. And so it's really meaningful work. There's a lot of presentations, workshops in the college to present about the financial aid options for the college to the students.
So as far as housing goes, there's no such thing as a typical work day at all, because it really just depends on what happens. And if you're serving on duty. So if you're on duty, it's going to take precedence no matter what it is. So for instance, not this week, but the week before, I was on duty, but I was also in the midst of my assignments week, is what I call it. It's Hell Week, essentially. Where I do a lot of assignments for our residential learning community. So mine doesn't necessarily go on a day-by-day continuous cycle, but I would say year by year, there's certain cycles that happen over and over. So for instance, beginning of the year, I know it's going to be training. The first couple of weeks of the year, it's going to be heavy into programs. The next couple of weeks of the year, everybody's going to just be losing their crap. So we're going to have to be dealing with all of the student conduct, because they're free, right? They can do what they want, they're adults, but really not. And there's like a cycle of things that happen. So that week was my assignments week, but it was also, I was on duty. So even if it's my busiest time of the year, if something happens and if we have a fire out in one of the residence halls, or if there's a death on campus or something like that, like my assignments need to go to the wayside, and I'm going to have to work on those outside of my regular hours. I think Chris said, you know, your department, your organization, a lot of those things will dictate what your regular work week looks like. And I think that is probably the most accurate statement when it comes to workload, your environment that you're working in, out of anything that I've seen in student affairs. Because I've worked in places where on paper, I should be doing 9 to 5 and I should be just fine at 9 to 5. And I've been at other places where it should be nothing close to 9 to 5, but I've had really good supervisors, people that are looking out for your hours. The environment that I'm in right now, all of our leadership team has family. And because of that, I think we are very flexible in what time looks like. I've never had anybody in my current position come to me and be like, you're late. I'm like, I'm late every day, because it doesn't matter, because they know I'm going to be staying late. So like there's certain flex accommodations that we all know and have for each other, because we know that there is no typical day, right? Like you never know what's going to happen, what duty call you're going to get, what staff emergency is happening. So I think, like I said, there's those cycles of things that happen from throughout the year. But I would say week to week, day to day, there's not really a lot of consistency when it comes to housing. And that's sometimes good and sometimes not so good. You just have to really be aware of what you have coming up on your plate, so that if those emergency situations do happen, if something arises, you need to be able to figure out, okay, what needs to get cut? Like, what is the priority right now? In my particular position, doing more of the programming side of the house, my area is the thing that gets cut. So from a pride standpoint, I can't be the person that's like, well, you guys didn't finish what I told you to do. Because like, no, there was a fire, there was a student death, there was a this or that. Like, I have to be able to flex those things out and know that if my staff are busy with something and it has to happen, I have to be able to take that on. So I have to be really careful about what I give my staff as well, because at the end of the day, that could come back to me and it'd be on my plate to do. So I have to kind of balance multiple plates to make sure that we're not overdoing our staff as well as myself.
Thank you. Well, we're almost at the hour. I'm going to ask one more question and then see if anyone else from the audience would like to ask, or maybe if there's a question, if there's something that you'd like to share or with the group, that'd be great. So my last question to you all is like, what keeps you inspired? I know burnout can be a thing, right? And in higher education, well, in any job really, but what keeps you inspired and motivated in your line of work?
I'll go, and this is stupid. I park outside of my office. Sounds dumb, right? But there's little creature comforts that make or break an experience. So I've been working in housing now for, a good 10 plus years. The institution I was at previously, I would have to walk a mile from a non-existent parking spot, get on a bus, cross a river, get to my office, spend the whole day running around on campus through multiple bus systems, and then go home. And that just became really exhausting. Like, even if the work was there, even if the stuff that I was doing was inspirational, sometimes like just the how I was doing the work became part of that burnout component. So now I literally park outside my office. I walk upstairs, I'm in my office, and when I want to go home, I walk downstairs and I go home. And it seems like such a stupid little thing, but it really does make a difference that like I know what the environment is that I have, so that I can put my energy towards what actually inspires me, like working with students, doing the programs, that kind of thing, and not necessarily worrying about all these other components, or thinking about like, okay, if I leave my office right now, I'm going to be able to catch this bus, and then I'm going to be able to get here, and then I'm going to be able to pick up my kid. Like, I live in Statesboro, Georgia. I'm 5 minutes tops going to get to anywhere in that damn town. that's it. Like, I don't have to worry too much about traffic or anything like that. And those small things really help me, I think, keep focused on the bigger components of like seeing those student learning moments, seeing the students connect to what's happening in their classroom to what they could be doing in their career. On my level, I don't necessarily get to see a lot of those things quite as often as I used to. So that's kind of sad. And now I've tried to kind of reframe that to not seeing it necessarily with my students, but seeing it with my staff members, be it grad students, entry-level staff, or our RA population.
I'll say for me that, as a counselor here at MPC, what really inspires me is being there for the students, like advocating for the students, working with you all, like to develop together an educational plan and making sure that we have all the requirements that you have so that you could transfer and go to your dream school. I feel like that drives me. I feel like for me, education was the vehicle to success. And so knowing that if I could help a student get there, that's what really inspires me. And at the end of the day, it gives me a big purpose in my life.
And I think for me, I think it's a combination of both of what they said. Well, not a combination because I know both of them said it, in the sense of having that balance is also important, and being able to say, when in having the balance in order to be present for the students. And I know Erin had mentioned that in regards to not worrying about all those other things that are happening afterwards. I think being present allows me to really, like Esteban said, is really be there for the student. I think it's important for me in regard to keeping me inspired is making sure that students are seen and heard, like that we see them, like we see everything that we can about them in the sense of their struggles, their achievements, their doubts, their fears, and know that that was us at one point, and still maybe at this point too in our profession, where we still have those same fears and those kind of things, or those same doubts, and making sure that they know that that they're not being judged, I think is also something in the space that we create for them, whether it's in the housing office or in counseling or in the classroom. I think that piece is definitely what inspires me to make sure that they feel that. And we all know that students, and not only students, but most people too, can feel if you're genuine or not. And I think that people in student services are genuine, even though they may have different roles. And whether it's, whether you're being an advisor or a counselor or in financial aid or housing, that we're genuine in the spaces that we're at. And I think that's important. That keeps me inspired, because I know that people that I work with are trying to be that for students. And so, yeah, that keeps me inspired, but also the boundaries keep me inspired, which has been something that I've been having to work on for a very long time, right? Where it used to be I'd work 16 hours and I just can't, because I want to be there for the students, but I also want to have other priorities as well. I think that keeps me inspired, because I've learned some balance. Doesn't mean that things don't fall apart at times where I am out of balance, but for the most part, I think that helps me stay present with the students, but also be healthy and available to them as well.
Thank you, Erin, Esteban, and Chris, for your amazing responses. I'm going to turn it over to anyone else in this room. Are there questions that you'd like to ask the panelists, or even the panelists themselves? Is there a question that we should have asked, or I should have asked, that you think is important for students who are watching this later on, that they should know about this pathway, this career field? All right. Well, then we'll just start ending this panel for today. Thank you very much, Erin, Esteban, Chris, for joining us and for sharing your pathway. I think, like I mentioned earlier, this is going to be helpful to students to learn that there are many ways to get into this career, that there's no one linear path, and that, yeah, there's a lot of opportunities within higher education, right? There's many types of jobs that one person can get within student affairs, higher education, and that even starting here at MPC as a student worker, that would get students exposed to potential opportunities for the future. Henry, I saw that you unmuted yourself.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to tell you guys, thank you. I appreciate this. It was really interesting. It's really inspiring what you guys do. I didn't have that when I went to college. It was just, you finish high school, you go to college. My parents weren't able to, but I never really had a plan for what I wanted to do. I just sort of drifted into acting and theater because I thought a regular 9-to-5 job would bore me. And of course, I ended up doing exactly what my dad did, working in produce shipping and working. Eventually, I went to the box office. So it's insightful what you said about Jihan earlier about kids not knowing what they're going to do when they're starting, but then realizing that it can change and other opportunities come up. And like you said, don't cry for those jobs you never had. Just enjoy what you did. So thank you guys.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I just want to say, thank you to the panelists. Your story is really, impactful. I myself, I'm applying to grad school to become a counselor, and I do work with Jihan at MPC. So I know Jihan, you're like one of my mentors. I look up to you a lot. But yeah, thank you so much. Guys, your story is really impactful. I've learned so much. And I hope, I do make a positive change, just like how every one of you is doing with your students. So thank you so much for this. This was amazing. So thank you for sharing.
You're very welcome. I was going to say one more thing, Giancarlo. Once you get into your master's in counseling program, let us know because we might hire student success coaches so you could actually do an internship.
Yeah, I will definitely let you know.
Yep.
Yeah, my husband, he's also going back to school. He's in Harnell right now. And he's like, I don't know what I want to do when I graduate. And I was like, and he sees the work that I do with students, and he's like, maybe I'll become a counselor. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, we can both go to grad school together. So thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you everyone for coming today. I'm going to go ahead and stop this recording, and hopefully for those of you who are watching, please look out for future career panels and events that MPC will be putting on. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.